When was the last time you did something for the first time? You remember that feeling of hesitation. Maybe you're not ready. Perhaps you're not good enough. You doubt yourself. It's a long road ahead. And right now you think, safe is a good place to be. You take a step back, but in doing so, you see the whole picture. You remember the stakes you were brave enough to take. So you shout at the unknown no longer, because you are your own master. You rise up, because you know you're not alone. Because you stand on the shoulders of the ones before you. And through them you realize you are more afraid of not trying than failing. They hold your hand, lead you to the peak of your potential. And once on top, you take the leap and do it. The first time you flew and tasted freedom. The first time you went the extra mile and never looked back. The first time you understood that something so small could change the course of your future. The first time you put yourself first. At First Metro Asset, we value you and your achievements. As we navigate through this better normal together, we are here to help you cherish your firsts and make those moments last.
In order to make our annual shareholders meeting event as successful and smooth-flowing as possible, we need your full cooperation and adherence to the following guidelines. This ASM is being recorded. Attendance video and microphones are disabled by the host during the session to avoid interruptions. Due to logistical limitations of the meeting conducted virtually, open forum or discussion will not be possible during the meeting. However, stockholders may raise any relevant questions limited to the annual report by sending an email to asm@fami.com.ph. Any relevant questions or comment received via email shall be properly acknowledged, noted, and addressed accordingly. Thank you. Heavenly Father, we come to you today asking for guidance, wisdom, and support as we gather once again for the annual stockholders meeting. Help us to engage in a meaningful discussion. Fill us with your grace, Lord God, as we make right decisions, and continue to remind us that all that we do here today, all that we accomplish, is for the pursuit for the greater glory of God. May your goodness and love be present amongst us today. Come bless our gathering, our board of directors, our president, the officers, the FAMI family, our partners, and our shareholders with unity, hope, and vision. We ask these things in your most holy name. Amen.
Welcome everyone to the 2022 First Metro Asset Mutual Funds Annual Shareholders Meeting. Present on this event are the Board of Directors of First Metro Save and Learn Philippine Index Fund Inc., First Metro Consumer Fund Inc., First Metro Save and Learn Equity Fund Inc., First Metro Save and Learn Fixed Income Fund Inc., First Metro Save and Learn Balance Fund Inc., First Metro Save and Learn Money Market Fund Inc., First Metro Save and Learn Dollar Bond Fund Inc., and First Metro Save and Learn Focus Dynamic Fund Inc. Additional reminders to our shareholders who have completed the pre-registration requirements are qualified to vote. When the poll questions are launched, which will be shown on your screen, you may cast your vote on the proposed resolutions by clicking your choice from the available options, then click Submit. Results of the preliminary voting will be presented after each poll, and final results will be included in the minutes of the meeting. I am now turning over the digital floor to Brother Manny De Leon.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Chairman of the First Metro Save and Learn Philippine Index Fund Inc., Mr. Michael G. Sai, First Metro Consumer Fund Inc., Mr. Eduardo Esmenjola, and President of the First Metro Save and Learn Money Market Fund, Mr. Eduardo R. Carrion. Good afternoon and welcome to the year 2022 Joint Annual Stockholders Meeting of the following FAMI funds. First Metro Save and Learn Philippine Index Fund Inc. or SALFIN, First Metro Consumer Fund Inc. FMCF, First Metro Save and Learn Equity Fund Inc. SALEF, First Metro Save and Learn Fixed Income Fund Inc. SALFIF, First Metro Save and Learn Balance Fund Inc. SALBAF, First Metro Save and Learn Money Market Fund Inc. SALMMF, First Metro Save and Learn Dollar Bond Fund, SALDABAF, First Metro Save and Learn Focus Dynamic Fund or SALFocus. For the purpose of this meeting, SALFIN, FMCF, SALEF, SALFIF, SALBAF, SALMMF, SALDABAF, FMAFEF, and SALFocus shall be collectively referred to as FAMI funds. In view of the ongoing pandemic situation and the implementation of the community quarantine, the FAMI funds are unable to conduct year's annual stockholders meeting physically. Instead, our meeting shall be via remote communication with the stockholders participating by electronic means pursuant to the rules of the Securities and Exchange Commission. The meeting will now please come to order. We now go to the certification of notice and quorum. We request the respective chairpersons of each of the funds to determine if there is a quorum.
Ms. Secretary, have you sent the notice to the stockholders of SALFIN, and is there a quorum for this meeting?
Mr. Chairman, the required notices for SALFIN were duly sent. This is to certify that the notice for the 2022 Annual Stockholders Meeting was published to notify the shareholders of record in the business sections of Manila Times and Manila Standard on June 1 and June 2, respectively, in print and online format, and in FAMI and the company's website in accordance with the SEC regulations. They are actually present in person or represented by their proxies by remote communication, stockholders holding 87,498,447 common shares out of the 125,522,367 common shares outstanding as of record date on May 18, 2022. These constitute 69.71% of the outstanding capital, sir.
Ms. Secretary, have you sent the notice to the stockholders of SALMAF and FMCF, and is there a quorum for the meeting?
Mr. Chairman, the required notice for the SALMAF and FMCF were duly sent. This is also to certify that the notice for the 2022 Annual Stockholders Meeting was published to notify the stockholders of record in the business section of the Manila Times and the Manila Standard on June 1 and June 2, 2022, in print and online format, and published in the FAMI's website in accordance with the SEC regulations. There are actually present in person or represented by their proxies by remote communication stockholders holding the following shares. For the money market fund, we have 2,031,855,581 common shares out of the 2,688,039,984 common shares outstanding as of record date on May 18, 2022. These constitute 75.59% of the outstanding capital stock. We therefore have a quorum for the money market fund. For the First Metro Consumer Fund, Inc., we have 527,381,535 common shares out of the 778,511,614 common shares outstanding as of record date on May 18, 2022. These constitute 67.74% of the outstanding capital stock. We therefore have a quorum for First Metro Consumer Fund.
Secretary, have you sent a notice to the stockholders of Salfocus? And is there a quorum for this meeting?
Mr. Valoroso, the required notices for Salfocus were duly sent to the stockholders, and this is to certify that the notice for the 2022 annual stockholders meeting of Salfocus was published to notify the stockholders of record in the business section of the Manila Times and the Manila Standard on June 1 and 2, 2022, in print and in online format, and published in FAMI's website in accordance with the SEC regulations. There are actually present in person or by proxy by remote communication stockholders holding 983,245,917 common shares out of the 1,366,582,100 common shares outstanding as of record date on May 18, 2022. These constitute 71.95% of the outstanding capital. We therefore have a quorum for Salfocus, Mr. President.
Ms. Secretary, have you sent the notice to the stockholders of First Metro Save and Learn Equity Fund, Inc., First Metro Save and Learn Fixed Income Fund, Inc., First Metro Save and Learn Balance Fund, Inc., First Metro Save and Learn Dollar Bond Fund, Inc.? And is there a quorum for this meeting?
Mr. Chairman, the required notices were sent to the stockholders, and we also certify that the notice for the 2022 annual stockholders meeting of the funds mentioned were also published to notify the stockholders of record in the business sections of the Manila Times and Manila Standard on June 1 and 2, 2022, in print and in online format, and in FAMI and the company's website in accordance with the SEC regulations. There are actually present in person or represented by their proxies by remote communication stockholders holding the following shares. For SALEC, we have 598,180,936 common shares out of the 883,094,305 common shares outstanding as of record date on May 18, 2022. These constitute 67.74% of the outstanding capital stock. For SALFIF, we have 411,343,373 common shares out of the 608,217,090 common shares outstanding as of record date on May 18. These constitute 67.63% of the outstanding capital stock. For the balance fund, we have 291,354,986 common shares out of the outstanding 432,242,000 918 common shares outstanding as of record date on May 18, 2022. These constitute 67.41% of the outstanding capital stock. For the dollar bond fund, we have 447,976,115 common shares out of the 551,147,368 common shares outstanding as of record date on May 18, 2022. These constitute 81.28% of the outstanding capital stock. We therefore have a quorum for all the funds, Mr. Chairman.
There being the required quorum for all these FAMI funds, this joint meeting is therefore duly constituted for the transactions of the business in the funds' respective agenda. Each item for approval in the agenda will appear in your screen, and stockholders participating can cast their vote by clicking the appropriate box. The votes of stockholders who send their duly accomplished forms with votes prior to the meeting will be shown on screen. The additional votes cast online shall be added to the result of preliminary voting. Do we now go to the next item? Hello?
Yes,
Are we
Brother
still
Manny.
voting? Are we still
Ah.
voting?
Now we're moving on to the next item for the agenda, approval of minutes.
Okay. The next item is the approval of the minutes of the stockholders meeting of the FAMI funds held on June 16, 2021. The matters taken up in the said meetings are contained in the SEC Form 20 is definitive information statement and also published in our website. Is there any motion from the floor?
I am Marie Lorbis, stockholder of Consumer Fund and Philippine Index Fund. Mr. Chairman, I move for the approval of the minutes of the stockholders meeting held on June 16, 2021 for the FAMI funds.
Mr. Chair, I am Carlo Esguerra, proxy for Augusto Toledo, stockholder of SALF and SALFIF. I second the motion, Mr. Chair.
The host will now launch the poll question. You may cast your votes by clicking on the available options.
Appearing first is the poll for Save and Learn Philippine Index Fund. Followed by First Metro Consumer Fund. Next is Save and Learn Equity Fund. Next is Save and Learn Fixed Income Fund. Save and Learn Balance Fund. Save and Learn Money Market Fund. Save and Learn Dollar Bond Fund, and Save and Learn Focus Dynamic Fund. The voting will now be closed. Mr. Chairman,
Okay. May I now request the corporate secretaries to present the preliminary voting results?
Sir, based on the preliminary voting results of SALFIN, we have 69.71% who voted in favor, none voted against, and there are no abstentions.
Mr. Chairman, based on the preliminary voting results were obtained to approve the minutes. SALEF 67.74%, SALPIF 67.63%, SALBAF 67.41%, SALDABAF 81.28%, Consumer Fund 67.74%, Money Market Fund 75.59%, and SALFocus 71.95%. None voted against, and there are no abstentions, Mr. Chairman.
There being a motion duly made and seconded, and the required votes obtained, and there being no objections for the approval of the minutes of the annual stockholders' meetings of the FAMI funds held on June 16, 2021, said minutes is approved. The next item in the agenda is the annual report to the stockholders. Ms. Karen Liza M. Roa, FAMI President, will now render the report on operations and financial condition and the FAMI Fund's performance in 2021. Ma'am Karen?
Good afternoon, everyone. Let me just share my slides. Okay. Isa, do you see my slides?
Ms. Karen, your slides now being seen by our attendees. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, to the Board of Directors and our shareholders. I will report on the fund's performance as well as the fund manager's performance in managing the funds. So to start off with, I will give you an executive summary, provide you the financial highlights, and then, as mentioned, provide also the fund performance and competitive analysis, after which I will hand over the floor to our fund manager for a market outlook. To start off with, just to make mention in summary, all throughout 2021, happy to note that we have been able to maintain our ranking across the actively managed equity funds, resulting into better than benchmark results. So we have been able to outperform the benchmark, and at the same time, we have been able to outperform many of our peers in the mutual fund space. So we'll go through that in a little bit more detail in a short bit. Okay. To provide you some financial highlights of each of the funds, allow me to go through it. The Save and Learn Equity Fund, which is our largest fund to date, increased by about 6.6% from December 2020 to December 2021, ending at 4.468 billion in total assets. The return on equity, likewise, we saw about 156% increase from 2020, year-end 2020 to year-end 2021. So in 2020, we ended at negative 6.07. However, for 2021, we ended at 3.4. The NAV PS likewise had increased from 4.94 in December 2020 to 5.05 in December 2021, or a 2.3 increase in NAV PS for the full year of 2021. We're reporting all of these financial highlights, given that this is the annual shareholders for 2021. I just wanted to be able to make that clear, no? The Save and Learn Fixed Income Fund, meanwhile, declined by about 23% from 1.982 billion to about 1.5 billion for the full year of 2021. The return on equity had likewise declined from 3.5 in 2020 to about 1.29%. This is both on account of market values and redemptions experienced throughout 2021. The NAV PS declined by from 2.4 to 2.42. So a slight decline in NAV PS for the full year of 2021. The balance fund, meanwhile, had also a decline from 1.394 in total equity, shareholders' equity, to 1.291 billion in 2021. The return on equity, however, had increased by about almost 580%, from negative 0.23 in 2020 to about 1.09% in 2021. NAV, there was a slight increase in NAV PS from 2.62 to 2.65, or a 0.9% increase in net asset value per share. The Save in Dollar Bond Fund has the equivalent of 14.6 million in US dollars. That was 171% increase from the 2020 figures of 5.3 million. The return on equity declined from 4.96 in 2020 to a negative 3.06 in 2021. The NAV PS declined as well from 0.0273 to 0.026 in 2021. The money market fund saw almost a doubling in 2021. It ended 2020 at 1.4 billion and increased to 2.7 billion at the end of 2021. The return on equity, however, declined from 1.40 to about 0.85 in 2021. The NAV PS saw a slight increase from 1.048 to 1.058. So the Save and Learn Money Market Fund was actually the highest selling mutual fund for 2021. As to the First Metro Consumer Fund Inc., we saw an increase also in total shareholders' equity from 479 million to 587 million, or a 22.6% increase year on year. The return on equity likewise increased to by about 127%, from negative 11.84 in 2020 to 3.22% in 2021. The NAV PS had a 3.6% increase from 0.74 to 0.76. The Save and Learn Philippine Index Fund also saw an increase in total shareholders' equity by 14.8%, from 79.843 million in 2020 to 91,638,000 in 2021. The return on equity saw a 79% increase from negative 3.77 in 2020 to negative 7.79% in 2021. The net asset value per share declined, however, by 1.7%, from 0.7764 to 0.7632. Save and Learn Focus Dynamic Fund, meanwhile, saw a decline in total shareholders' equity year on year by 14.2%, from 32.651 million to 28 million as of December 31, 2021. The return on equity, however, increased by 130%, from negative 9.53 to positive 2.93 year ending 2021. Net asset value per share likewise increased by 4% from 0.1981 to 0.2061. So in summary, our total AUM and sales performance for all the funds, with the exception of the exchange traded fund, stands at 11.368 billion, or a 12% increase from the prior year of December 2020, where we ended at 10.149. Our gross sales increased by about 14% as well, from 4 billion in 2020 for the full year 2020 to about 4.6 billion for the full year in 2021. However, we did see large redemptions in 2021 and to the tune of 1.023 billion, but this is nevertheless the net sales, however, is a reduction or a decline from the previous year of 1.7. Okay. The table at the bottom will show you, meanwhile, the May figures, just a year-to-date figures for total AUM, gross sales, and net sales. So currently, we're still pretty much flat from our December numbers, and we continue to be at about 11.3 billion. Okay. Next slide. This slide will show you the gross and the net sales on a per fund level. So as of December 2020 and 2021. So if you'll take a look at it, the Save and Learn Equity Fund had the highest selling subscriptions for increase rather. It was the highest increase from 2020 to 2021. However, the largest selling fund for 2021 was actually the money market fund. Okay. If we look at the net sales, which is gross sales minus the redemptions, the money market fund as well reflects that it has the highest net sales in terms of absolute numbers. So net sales is 1.3 billion for the money market fund, followed by, and then everything is pretty much on a smaller scale. So 2021 was really the time for the money market. A lot of funds actually found, a lot of fund flow found its way into those funds, seeking a little bit more capital protection and minimal volatility. Okay. Yeah. Okay. My next few slides will reflect the fund performance versus the benchmark and versus other competitors in the market. This slide will show you that the one in orange is the benchmark for each of these funds. So we have two equity laced that are actively managed. We have the Save and Learn Equity Fund, as I mentioned, that stands at about 4.3 billion as of December 2021. And then we have the Consumer Fund, which is about 587 million. Okay. As of December 2021, okay, the return of the Save and Learn Equity Fund was 2.29, positive 2.29. Meanwhile, the Consumer Fund generated a return of 3.59%, outperforming the benchmark, which generated a negative return of 0.23. So almost 200 basis points above the benchmark for SALEF and about 3.5% above the benchmark for the Consumer Fund. If we take a look at the index funds, FAMI manages two index funds. We have the Exchange Traded Fund and we have the Save and Learn Philippine Index Fund. Again, the benchmark generated a negative return of 0.24. Our ETF generated a return of positive 0.67, while the Save and Learn Philippine Index Fund generated a return of negative 1.7. We also have two balance funds, the First Metro Save and Learn Balance Fund, which has a total AUM of almost 1.3 billion as of the end of 2021, generating a return for 2021 of 0.94, positive 0.94, ranking 4 out of 10 mutual fund players in the market. And then we also have a Save and Learn Focused Dynamic Fund, which at December 2021 stood at about 28 million. That generated a return of 4.04% for the full year and ranked second out of 10 balanced funds in the market. Once again, both funds outperformed their index, which was the PSEI of 50% and fixed income blended benchmark of 50% as well. So it's a composite. If we take a look at the peso bond funds, FAMI has one peso bond fund, which stands at about 1.5 billion. Okay, that generated in 2021 a negative return of 1.13, slightly below the benchmark that generated a return of negative 1%. And then we also have a dollar bond fund, which stands at about 744 million pesos, or the equivalent. That for the full year of 2021 generated a return of negative 2.26. The money market fund, which was the fastest or highest selling mutual fund of First Metro Asset Management, currently stands at 2.7 billion. And for 2021, it generated a return of 0.94, whereas the money market benchmark stood at about 1.75. Okay. The next slide will show you the various peers in the categories. So for the blue, the row that is highlighted in blue, these are the First Metro funds, and all the other players mentioned are the competitors. We also track our performance against various UITFs. So at the bottom, you'll see BDO Equity Fund, BPI Equity Value Fund, and Metro Equity Fund. Where there's an indicator that's U, these are actually UITFs and not mutual funds. So as mentioned, Consumer Fund full year 2021 ranked third out of 13 mutual funds, ranking only after the ATRAM Phil Equity. So the Consumer Fund ranked number 3, okay? While the Save and Learn Equity Fund ranked 6 out of 13. But if you'll take a look at the returns between the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and 6th, they're pretty much close together. The ATRAM and the ATRAM Alpha Opportunity Fund, like the name mentions, is an alpha fund. Okay. The next slide are the passively managed funds. As mentioned, we have two passively managed funds. We have the ETF, ranking number 1 in 2021 against all index funds in the market, generating a return of 0.67. And then we have the First Metro Save and Learn Philippine Index Fund that was ranked 7th and generating a return of negative 1.70. Some of the other players in the category include Phil Equity, Philippine Stock Index Fund by BPI, Phil Equities MSCI, Sun Life, Philam Asset Management's Equity Index Fund. The next slide is the balanced fund category. So First Metro Asset Management has two balanced funds. The Save and Learn Focused Dynamic Fund, which currently has about 28 million as of December 2021, ranking 2nd in terms of performance among all of the balanced funds in the mutual fund space. And we also have the First Metro Save and Learn Balanced Fund, which stands at about 1.3 billion and ranking 4th among all its peers, generating a return as of 2021 of 0.94. Okay, once again, we compare ourselves also to certain UITFs. We have the BDO Peso Balance Fund, the BPI Balance Fund, and the Metro Bank Balance Fund. The benchmark of the balance funds is a composite of the index, PSEI index at 50%, plus fixed income blended benchmark at 50% as well. Okay. And then we have the bond fund. We have the first Metro Save and Learn bond fund that stands at about 1.5 billion, ranking pretty much at the middle of the pack, or generating a return of negative 1.13% for full year 2021. Some of the players there are Coco Life Fixed Income Fund, which is largely a corporate bond fund, ALFM, which is a BPI fund, which is also corporate, largely corporates. And then we have the Phil Managed Income Fund, Sun Life, Atram, Phil Equity, and First Metro Save and Learn. And then we have the First Metro Save and Learn Dollar Bond Fund. Current as of the end of December 2021, it stood at about 745 million, or the equivalent in pesos, ranking 6th out of 8 players, generating a return of negative 2.26. And lastly, we have the Money Market Fund, which as of the end of December 2021 stood about 2.7 billion, ranking 3rd among many of the other mutual funds and generating a full year return of 0.94% for 2021. I just wanted to show also some of the efforts of the marketing team with regard to reaching more investors and out there. So we do have our Facebook page that has about 103 followers currently. We have Twitter that has about 8,000 followers, Instagram at 6,400 followers. YouTube, we've got about 3,000 subscribers. We also have the Viber group, which has about 1,660 where we members. This is where we provide a lot of the market outlook, and also our MailChimp email subscription blast. So you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Viber. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. That's all that I have. Brother Manny, back to you.
Okay. I'm back. I lost my connection. Thank you, Ma'am Karen. Am I audible?
Yes,
Hello?
Brother Manny, we can hear you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ma'am Karen. The report is noted. Due to logistical limitations of the meeting conducted virtually, open forum discussion will not be possible during the meeting. However, a stockholder will be given opportunity to raise any relevant questions or express an appropriate comment limited to the annual report by sending an email to asm@fami.com.ph. Any relevant questions or comment received via email shall be properly acknowledged, noted, and addressed accordingly. Mr. Edser Trinidad, First Vice President and Head of Investment and Research Unit of FAMI, will now render the report on market outlook. Sir Edser?
Good afternoon to our shareholders. Can you please give me a moment to share my screen? Okay. There are three things that an investor has to ponder this 2022. First, we have an incoming new administration. Second, the current Russia-Ukraine war that has really affected a lot of the commodity prices, and that has led to inflation across across the globe. For the new administration, the key thing here is to emphasize on sustaining the reforms that the Duterte administration has already started. And one of the key things in sustaining this reform is the appointment of the new cabinet members, especially in terms of the economic team. And so far, the appointment of economic team has been met with a lot of enthusiasm when the Marcos administration has appointed Secretary Jokno to head of the Department of Finance, and Governor Felipe Mendalia to head the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. Because maintaining or sustaining the economic reforms is key to us in keeping our investment grade credit rating. Maintaining an investment credit rating is quite important in order to make the Philippines still, or to maintain its attractiveness to foreign investors. What are the long-term effects of the Russia-Ukraine war? This is quite critical in terms of our global economy because of the key things. Both countries play a vital role in terms of providing commodities in the global economy, as Ukraine is one of the largest exporters of some critical soft commodities such as wheat, corn, and fertilizer, whereas Russia provides the biggest natural gas in Europe, as well as it also exports about 40% of EU's requirement. So this is quite critical in maintaining and fueling the growth in that region. And because of the war, a lot of Western countries has imposed embargo on Russia oil and natural gas exports. And because of its conflict, Ukraine had also had difficulty or challenges in exporting its commodity products. As a result, the prices of key commodity such as crude, natural gas, corn, and other metallic minerals had suffered a double-digit increase in terms of their cost. And what is also quite worth noting that prices for these commodities have been on the rise since 2021 because of an increase in demand due to the reopening of a lot of the economies in the region. Last year, we've seen an average of about 30 to 40% increase for these products. And so far, for the 6 months of the year, we've seen those prices have really exceeded what we had seen in terms of a growth last year. So basically, there are a lot of questions: what will be the end game? The short answer to that is, it is a moving target in terms of the timetable when will this end, considering that Ukraine has the strong backing from the Western countries. In addition, Russia seems to be bent on securing a bigger territory in Ukraine. So this means that the conflict will linger, and this could have a long-term effect in terms of the global economy. Looking at the inflation, because of the Russia-Ukraine disruption, there are still also a lot other factors that has an effect in terms of the inflation in the global markets. First is on the supply chain issue, because a lot of countries have started to reopen. Um, a lot of supply chain provider have difficulty filling up the demand, because during 2020, whereby there has been a drop in demand, a lot of these logistics company have cut down in terms of the production and manpower, and with the sudden surge in demand, these supply chain companies had difficulty meeting that demand. Another thing that has also affected or really um, increased or provided or fueled the increase in prices is on the reopening of China, and also um, the, during the increased COVID infections in China, which they had a zero COVID policy restrictions that has also affected the production of key components or key products. And as you well aware, that China is the biggest export market, and it also produces a lot of the materials that the world economy needs. Because of the China's zero COVID policy restriction, a lot of these production had interrupted, and that has resulted to a supply shortage across the global markets. And due to this, the economic recovery of the Philippines is vulnerable because we are a major supplier or major user of crude oil and natural gas, as well as wheat. And it has really resulted to an increase in our inflation. And as you can see here, oil prices from a pandemic low, it has breached the $100 per barrel level. And considering that oil is the main fuel in terms of our transportation, it has a far-reaching effect on the country's inflation. However, there's also some silver lining to this situation, considering that oil is being exported by the Middle East countries. Thus, those economies should benefit from the higher oil prices, which increases demand for Filipinos. And in terms of the positive note, we expect that OFW remittances should improve because of higher deployment, because of an increase in demand coming from the Middle East. Another silver lining is in terms of our COVID cases, because we've seen our cases have significantly declined because of the lower infection rate, as well as an increase in terms of the number of our Filipinos who received vaccination. Thus, we've seen the past couple of months, we've slowly opened a lot of industries, and that has resulted to an improvement in terms of demand. However, there has been some increased number of higher cases during the past couple of weeks, but hopefully our utilization rate in hospitals will remain low, so we can still be considered that our case still be classified as a low risk. Looking at the forecast among our broker partners, they've already adjusted their EPS growth downwards from 24% last April to the current level of about 20.3%, as the higher inflation and higher interest rate environment. They expect that due to this, the EPS growth may be tempered because of higher cost among the Philippine companies. Because of those concerns, their target for the PSEI level was also cut from 8,000 to 7,600. Looking at inflation, inflation has also been adjusted upwards from 4.3 to 4.6 because of the high inflation rate. They're expecting that the policy rate will increase from the previous target of about 2.5 to about 2.75% as of our June survey. Looking at the performance of our index, we're still at the middle of the pack. This is as of June 15, whereby in terms of the performance, we're down by about 11.28%. At least we're in terms of the middle pack. If you are going to compare us with the performance of developed markets, the developed markets have performed quite bad, where the average decline is about 15%. So what will our asset strategy for each of the asset classes? For the fixed income, considering that because of the high inflation rate environment in the US, we expect that yields in the US will continue to increase, considering that the Fed is expected to increase its policy rate in order to quell inflation. Thus, the BSP will also follow suit. However, we don't expect that the BSP will be as aggressive as the US Fed. In terms of the inflation, as you can see here in the chart, inflation will remain to be a challenge. So far it will continue to be at the higher target band of the PSP. Due to this, we expect that yields across the fixed income asset classes will remain at a high level because of expectations that the BSP might change their tack in order to address the inflation that our country is facing. Looking at the equities market, the equities market will remain to be, I think, volatile, at least for the next couple of months. And our strategy here is to be selective in order to look for what are the alpha bets in order to continue to remain or to continue to best the benchmark. However, we expect that the decline in the market may not be as worse, considering that the pressure, selling pressure, has coming from foreign investors will be lower, considering that the foreign ownership is now at historic lows. For our outlook for the rest of the year, for the equities market, we expect that the market will be at best be flat on a year-on-year basis, because we're looking at growth will be much subdued because of the higher um, cost or input cost that can affect the profitability of a lot of companies. However, we remain on the positive that consumer confidence may improve as inflation may be tempered by second half. For the fixed income market, we expect that there still is some upward bias for the local bonds, considering that there still is some concern on inflation. For the headwinds, we still expect that the main headwinds that we're facing, right, an elevated rise in inflation, which can lead to aggressive policy response. We also expect that um, because of the concerns of higher current account deficit and the higher or high debt to GDP level, there might be some fears that the country may face a potential credit downgrade. The COVID situation remains to be the biggest question mark, as we do not discount the possibility of new variants may come into country and may affect or may stall the reopening of our economy. And lastly, a prolonged Ukraine-Russia war may continue to wreak havoc on our market. For the tailwind, we're hoping that the hostilities will recede, and that should be, I think, well received by investors. We're hoping that all of the supply chain kinks will be addressed. Thus, the supply situation will also be remedied. We're still hoping that the post-election optimism that has provided some strong growth or strong bounce back during the past presidential elections will continue to be the norm. And lastly, a potential drop in commodity prices can also bring in or can also improve the positive sentiment among the investing public, thus provided a certain push for both asset class. That ends my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Edser Trinidad. The report is noted. We now move to the next item in the agenda, which is the ratification of all acts and resolutions of the Board of Directors and Management and all committees for the fiscal year 2021 of FAMI funds, including the following. Is there any motion from the floor?
I am Ruth Duterte, proxy for Mary Pines Crest Antonio, stockholder of Save and Learn Equity Fund, Consumer Fund, and Save and Learn Balance Fund. Mr. Chairman, I move that all acts, transactions, and resolutions of the Board of Directors and Management and all committees of the FAMI funds for the fiscal year 2021, including the renewal of the management and distribution agreement with FAMI, and the minutes of meeting of the board and board committees be ratified and confirmed.
I am Emmanuel Lagrimas, stockholder of FMCF and proxy for Diana Tolentino, stockholder of FMCF. I second the motion.
The host will now launch the poll question. You may cast your vote by clicking on the available options.
Okay. Appearing first is the poll for Save and Learn Philippine Index Fund. Followed by First Metro Consumer Fund. Next is Save and Learn Equity Fund. Next is Save and Learn Fixed Income Fund. Save and Learn Balance Fund. Save and Learn Money Market Fund. Save and Learn Dollar Bond Fund. And Save and Learn Focus Dynamic Fund. The voting will now be closed. Mr. Chairman.
May I now request the corporate secretaries to present the preliminary voting results.
Sir, based on the preliminary voting results for Salfin, we have 69.71 who voted in favor, none voting against, and there are no abstentions.
Mr. Chairman, based on the preliminary voting results, the following votes were obtained to approve the minutes. SALEF 67.74%, SALFIF 67.63%, SALBAF 67.41%, SALDABAF 81.28%, FMCF 67.74%, Money Market Fund 75.59%, and SALFOCUS 71.95%. None voted against, and there are no abstentions.
There being a motion duly made and seconded, and the required votes obtained to ratify all acts and resolutions of the Board of Directors, Management, and all committees of the FAMI funds for the fiscal year 2021, including the renewal of the management and distribution agreement, and the minutes of meetings of the Board and the committees of the respective funds, the motion is carried. May I request the Corporate Secretary, Attorney Ninfa B. Pastrana, to present the next item and explain the amendments to the Articles of Incorporation and bylaws submitted to the stockholders. Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of the Corporate Secretary of Salfin, I would like to report that the Board of Directors of the following funds held the respective meetings on December 16, 2021. SALEF, SALFIF, Balance Fund, Consumer Fund, Money Market Fund, and Salfin. While Dollar Bond Fund held its special and regular meeting on September 7, 2021 and December 16, 2021, respectively. On the said meetings, the respective Board of Directors approved the amendment of the respective Articles of Incorporation as follows. The amendment of the primary purpose to include the phrase "as may be allowed by the Investment Company Act and its implementing rules and regulations," or any amendment thereto. The second amendment is to delete the phrase "to acquire or become interested in any securities by underwriting, syndicate participation, or otherwise." The next is the amendment of Article 7, letter B, to delete the phrase "provided, however, that no such redemption may be made unless the corporation has assets legally available for such purpose, whether arising out of the capital, paid in surplus or other surplus, net profits, or otherwise. The amendments were done to be consistent with the provisions of the Investment Company Act and its implementing rules and regulations. We are submitting the amendment approved by the majority of the board to the stockholders for ratification. For the amendment of the Articles of Incorporation, the vote of the stockholders holding at least 2/3 of the outstanding capital stock is required. We would also like to report that the Board of Directors of the FAMI funds unanimously approved the amendments to the bylaws to conform to the provisions of the revised Corporation Code and the Investment Company Act, as well as its implementing rules and regulation. And the following are the amendments to the bylaws. The Article 2, Section 4, to correct the section quoted. Amendment of Article 2, Section 5, to add Section 49 of the revised Corporation Code. The amendment number 3, amendment of Article 3, Section 3, to delete the phrase owners of at least 1/3 of the total outstanding capital stock. Number 4, the amendment of Article 3, Section 4 to align with the provisions in the revised Corporation Code. Number 5 is the amendment of the Article 3, Section 7 to align with the provisions of for the remote communication provision. Number 6 is the amendment of Article 4, Section 4 to include remote communication. Number 7 is the amendment of Article 6, Section 7 to align with the provision of the revised Corporation Code. Number 8 is the amendment of Article 4, Section 12, the same to align with the revised Corporation Code. The amendment of Article 5, Section 1 to align with the provisions of the revised Corporation Code. Number 10, amendment of Article 6, Section 1 to add the compliance officer in the compliance with ICA rules. Number 11 is the amendment of Article 7, Section 1 to add the phrase subject to the rules of ICA, Rule 5.1.6, or any amendments thereto on the outsourcing or delegation of the function of the fund manager in compliance with the ICA rules. Number 12 is the amendment of Article 8, Section 1 to add phrase in custodian in compliance with the ICA rules. Amendment of Article 8, Section 3 to add phrase in auditors in compliance with the ICA rules. Number 14 is the amendment of Article 9, Section 1. Number 15 is the amendment of Article 10, Section 1 to add a provision in the determination of the net asset value per share in compliance with the ICA rule. Number 16 is the amendment of Article 11, Section 1. Amendment of 17, amendment of Article 11, Section 2. And number 18 is the amendment of Article 12, Section 7 to update the provision in compliance with the revised Corporation Code. All the amendments were made to comply with the revised Corporation Code and the ICA, and the particular descriptions are in the definitive information statement sent to the stockholders and published in our website. We are submitting these amendments for the ratification of the stockholders. So for the amendment of the bylaws, the vote of the majority of the stockholders is required.
Is there any motion from the floor?
I am Florabel Pajarillo, stockholder of Money Market Fund, Equity Fund, Focus Dynamic Fund, and a proxy for Ms. Angelica Toledo, stockholder of Dollar Bond Fund, Equity Fund, and Fixed Income Fund. Mr. Chairman, I move for the ratification of the amendment of the Article of Incorporation as explained by the Corporate Secretary and the amendments to the bylaws as approved by the Board.
I second the motion.
The host will now launch a separate poll question for the amendment of the Articles of Incorporation and bylaws. You may cast your vote by clicking on the available options.
The first set of poll questions is for the amendment of Articles of Incorporation. We have the poll for Save and Learn Philippine Index Fund. Followed by First Metro Consumer Fund. Next is Save and Learn Equity Fund. Next is Save and Learn Fixed Income Fund. Save and Learn Balance Fund. Save and Learn Money Market Fund. And Save and Learn Dollar Bond Fund. The next set of poll questions is for the amendment of bylaws. We have the poll for Save and Learn Philippine Index Fund, followed by First Metro Consumer Fund, next is Save and Learn Equity Fund, next is Save and Learn Fixed Income Fund, Save and Learn Balance Fund, Save and Learn Money Market Fund, and Save and Learn Dollar Bond Fund. The voting will now be closed. Mr. Chairman.
May I now request the corporate secretaries to present the preliminary voting results?
For the amendment to the articles and the amendment to the bylaws, based on the voting results of Salfin, we have 69.71% who voted in favor, none voting against, and no abstentions.
Based on the preliminary voting results for the amendments of the Articles of Incorporation and the bylaws, the following votes were obtained to approve the amendments.
It's my turn now, attorney.
Sir, one moment.
Okay.
For Saleh, 67.74%. Salfif, 67.63%. Salbaf, 67.41%. Saldabaf, 81.28%. FMCF, 67.74%. And Money Market Fund, 75.59%. None voted against and there are no abstentions.
There being a motion duly made and seconded, and the required votes obtained for the ratification of the amendments of the Articles of Incorporation and bylaws, and there being no objection, the motion is carried. May I request the Corporate Secretary, Attorney Ninfa B. Pastrana, to present the next item and explain the amendments to the Articles of Incorporation and bylaws submitted to the stockholders of Salfocus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Board of Directors of Salfocus, during its regular and special meeting on March 31 and May 18, 2022, approved the amendments of the Articles of Incorporation as follows. The change of name, number one is the change of name from First Metro Save and Learn Focus Dynamic Fund, Inc. to First Metro Save and Learn Dynamic Allocation Fund, Inc. Number two is the amendment of the primary purpose to include the phrase as may be allowed by the as may be allowed by the Investment Company Act and its implementing rules and regulations or any amendments thereto. Number three is the amendment of the secondary purpose to delete the phrase, letter I, to acquire or become interested in any securities by underwriting, syndicate, participation, or otherwise. Number four is the amendment of Article 3 to change the principal address of the corporation to 18th floor, PS Bank Center, 777 Paseo de Rojas Street, Makati City. Number five is the amendment of Article 7, letter B, to delete the phrase, provided, however, that no such redemption may be made unless the corporation has assets legally available for such purpose, whether arising out of capital, paid in surplus or other surplus, net profits or otherwise. Number six is the approval to increase the authorized capital stock of Salfocus from 4 million, consisting of 400 million shares, to 5 billion pesos, consisting of 500 billion shares, and amending the Articles of Incorporation to reflect the amendments. The filing of the increase in the authorized capital stock with the SEC shall be made in several tranches, and the amount of which shall be determined by the board without going back to the stockholders for ratification. So the amendment mentions are consistent with the provisions of the Investment Company Act and its implementing rules and regulation, as well as the revised Corporation Code. So for the amendment of the Articles of Incorporation, the vote of the stockholders representing at least 2/3 of the outstanding capital stock is required. The Board of Directors of Salfocus also approved the amendments of the bylaws for the change of name and the revision of some of the provisions to conform to the revised Corporation Code and the Investment Company Act. We are submitting these amendments to the stockholders for ratification. For the amendment of the bylaws of Salfocus, the vote of the majority stockholders is required.
Any motion
Mr.
from the
Chairman.
floor?
I am Lloyd Aurelia, stockholder of FMCF and proxy for Nathaniel Padilla, stockholder of Salfocus, Salef, and Save and Learn Money Market Fund.
Mr. Chairman, I move for the ratification of the amendment of the article of incorporation explained by the corporate secretary, including the increase in authorized capital stock and the amendments to the bylaws as approved by the board.
I second the motion.
The host will now launch a separate poll question for the amendment of articles of incorporation and bylaws. You may now cast your vote by clicking on the available option.
Okay, so appearing first is the poll for the amendment of articles of incorporation for Save and Learn Focused Dynamic Fund. Next is the poll for the amendment of bylaws for Save and Learn Focused Dynamic Fund. The voting will now be closed. Mr. Chairman?
May I now request the corporate secretary to present the preliminary voting results?
Mr. Chairman, based on the preliminary voting results for the amendment of the articles of incorporation of Self-Focus, we obtained 71.95% to ratify the amendment ratify the amendment. None voted against and there are no abstentions. For the amendment of the bylaws, we have obtained 71.95% to approve and none voted against and there are no abstentions.
There being a motion truly made and seconded to ratify the board resolutions to increase the authorized capital stock from 4 million, consisting of 400 million shares, to 5 million pesos, consisting of 500 billion shares, and to amend the articles of incorporation and bylaws to reflect the amendments explained by the corporate secretary. And considering that we have more than 2/3 of the stockholders here present in person and by proxy, the motion is carried. Next in the agenda is the election of the members of the board of directors of the FAMI funds to serve for the year 2022-2023. Mr. Michael G. Sai, Chairman of the Nomination Committee of SALFIN, will now explain the nomination procedure under current SEC rules on behalf of the FAMI funds. The rules apply to all the funds. Mr. Michael Sai.
Mr. Chairman, in compliance with the requirements of Securities and Exchange Commission, as well as the FAMI Mutual Funds Manual on Corporate Governance, the nomination committee of each of the FAMI mutual funds was tasked with the review and evaluation of the qualifications of all persons nominated to the board. Pursuant to this mandate, the nomination committee of each of the funds reviewed the qualifications of the following nominees to the board of directors and certifies that based on the records, they have all the qualifications and none of the disqualifications prescribed by law and regulations. The list of nominees for each of the FAMI funds is contained in definitive information statement sent to all stockholders and submitted to SEC prior to today's meeting. The nominees for the First Metro Save and Learn Philippine Index Funds Incorporated are as follows: Mr. Michael Zisay, Mr. Robert T. Yu, Mr. Winston Andrew L. Pexon, Father Roderick C. Salazar, Mr. Jose Alan Arellano. Father Roderick Salazar Jr. and Mr. Jose Alan Arellano are nominees for independent directors. The nominees for the First Metro Consumer Fund, Inc. are as follows: Mr. Michael Sai, Mr. Robert Yu, Ms. Karen Liza Roa, Ms. Rodora Angela Ferrer, Father Rafael Eloriaga, Ms. Rodora Angela Ferrer, and Father Rafael Eloriaga are nominees for independent directors. The nominees for the First Metro Save and Learn Money Market Fund, Inc. are as follows: Mr. Michael Sai, Mr. Edward Carion, Mr. Edgar Solilopsi, Father Rafael Eloriaga, Mr. Jose Alan Arellano, Father Roderick Salazar, and Dr. Bernardo Villegas. Dr. Bernardo Villegas and Edgar Solilopsi, Father Rafael Eloriaga, Mr. Jose Alan Arellano, and Father Roderick Salazar are nominees for independent directors. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
May I ask Mr. Edwin Valeroso?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the following are the nominees for the first Metro Save and Learn Focus Dynamic Fund Incorporated: Mr. Eduardo R. Carrion, Mr. Roberto T. Yu, Dr. Bernardo M. Villegas, Attorney Abelardo V. Cortez, Father Roderick C. Salazar Jr., SBD, and here Dr. Bernardo Villegas and Attorney Abelardo Cortez and Father Roderick Salazar are nominees for independent directors.
The nominees for the first Metro Save and Learn Equity Fund, Inc. are as follows: Brother Manuel V. De Leon, FMS, Dr. Victor A. Abola, Ms. Karen Lisa M. Roa, Father Rafael Eloriaga, Mr. Edgar B. Solilapsi. Father Rafael Eloriaga and Mr. Edgar B. Solilapsi are nominees for independent directors. The nominees for the first Metro Save and Learn Fixed Income Fund, Inc. are as follows: Brother Manuel B. De Leon, FMS, Dr. Victor A. Abola, Ms. Karen Lisa M. Roa, Father Rafael K. Eloriaga, Mr. Edgar Solilapsi. Father Rafael Eloriaga and Mr. Edgar Solilapsi are nominees for independent directors. The nominees for the first Metro Save and Learn Balance Funds are as follows: Brother Manuel V. De Leon, Dr. Victor A. Abola, Ms. Karen Lisa M. Roa, Ms. Rodora Angela Ferrer, and Mr. Jose C. Nograles. Ms. Rodora Angela Ferrer and Mr. Jose C. Nograles are nominees for independent directors. The nominees for the first Metro Save and Learn Dollar Bond Fund, Inc., Brother Manuel V. De Leon, Dr. Victor Abola, Ms. Karen Lisa M. Roa, Father Roderick Salazar Jr., Ms. Rodora Angela Ferrer, Father Roderick Salazar Jr., and Ms. Rodora Angela Ferrer are nominees for independent directors. Is there any motion from the floor?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the nominees enumerated by the Nomination Committee Chairman or member be declared elected to the respective Board of Directors of the FAMI funds so named.
I second the motion.
The host will now launch the poll question. You may cast your votes by clicking on the available options.
Appearing first is the poll for Save and Learn Philippine Index Fund. Followed by First Metro Consumer Fund. Next is Save and Learn Equity Fund. Next is Save and Learn Fixed Income Fund. Save and Learn Balance Fund. Save and Learn Money Market Fund. Save and Learn Dollar Bond Fund, and Save and Learn Focus Dynamic Fund. The voting will now be closed. Mr. Chairman,
May I now request the corporate secretaries to present the preliminary voting results?
Sir, based on the preliminary voting results for Salfin, we have 69.71% who voted in favor of all the nominee directors as mentioned, none voted against, and there are no abstentions.
Mr. Chairman, based on the preliminary voting results, all the directors nominees obtained the following votes. For SALF nominees, 67.74%. For SALFIF nominees, 67.63%. For SALBAF nominees, 67.41%. For SALDABAF nominees, 81.28%. For the FMCF nominees, 67.74%. For the money market fund nominees, 75.59%. And for the self-focused nominees, 71.95%, Mr. Chairman. None voted against and there are no abstentions.
Let it be on record that upon nominations duly made and there being no other nominations, the stockholders of the FAMI funds enumerated by Mr. Michael G. Sai, Mr. Edwin Valeroso, and yours truly were unanimously elected to serve on the respective boards. First, let me welcome our incoming directors, Ms. Karen Lisa M. Roa and Mr. Jose C. Nograles. We are also very grateful to our incumbent directors for their continuing and invaluable service to the company. Finally, and on behalf of the board, may I express gratitude to our valued stockholders for your steadfast loyalty over the years and for your faith and confidence while unusual times are upon us. We shall, with your support, face the challenges with hope. Anchored on the divine providence and with faith in the company's long-standing values of dedication and hard work, it is our honor and privilege to serve you and these esteemed institutions. The next item on the agenda is the appointment of the independent external auditor for the fiscal year 2022. The audit committee of the FAMI funds in its meeting held on June 28, 2022, had approved the appointment of SGV and Company as the independent external auditor. We now submit this for your ratification. For the ratification of the appointment of SGV and Company, the majority vote of the stockholders is required. Is there any motion from the floor?
Mr. Chair, I move that the appointment of CSIP Gores Velayo and Company as independent external auditor of FAMI funds be ratified.
I second the motion.
The host will now launch the poll question. You may cast your vote by clicking on the available options.
So appearing first is the poll for Save and Learn Philippine Index Fund. Followed by First Metro Consumer Fund. Next is Save and Learn Equity Fund. Next is Save and Learn Fixed Income Fund. Save and Learn Balance Fund. Save and Learn Money Market Fund. Save and Learn Dollar Bond Fund. And Save and Learn Focus Dynamic Fund. The voting will now be closed. Mr. Chairman?
May I now request the corporate secretaries to present the preliminary voting results?
For Salfin, Mr. Chairman, we have 69.71 who voted in favor, none voting against, and no abstentions.
For the following funds, the following votes were obtained to ratify the appointment of SGV and Company as the external auditor. For SALEF, 67.74%. For SALFIF, 67.63%. SALBAF, 67.41%. SALDABAF, 81.28%. FMCF, 67.74%. Money Market Fund, 75.59%. And SALFOCUS, 71.95%. None voted against, and there are no abstentions, Mr. Chair.
There being a motion duly made and seconded, and the required votes obtained, the appointment of SGV and Company as independent external auditor of the FAMI funds for the fiscal year 2022 is hereby ratified. Are there any other matters to be taken up?
None, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I
Sorry.
think there is one item to be presented by FAMI President.
Ma'am
Ms.
Karen,
Go.
okay, yeah. So may I give the floor now to Ma'am Karen to present some amendments in the prospectus?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We have the presentation. These are some of the changes that revisions that we are proposing on the prospectus of the various funds. So allow me to go through it very quickly. On the prospectus of the First Metro Save and Learn Dollar Bond Fund, we wish to amend the provision that allows the sale of common shares from 200 million and increase it to 770 million. This is to allow us to sell more shares of that fund. The second item is with regard to the prospectus of the First Metro Consumer Fund. And similarly, we are requesting to increase the common shares authorized from 200 million to 1 billion. Once again, this is to allow us to sell more. We are also requesting that the SEC has asked us to break down the sales load figures from the existing provision of a maximum of 3% and provide the breakdown, hence the proposed amendment where there is a breakdown as follows. The third one is the prospectus of the First Metro Save and Learn Philippine Index Fund. This is also asking us for a breakdown wherein the existing provision has less than 100,000, 2% sales load, 100,000 to less than 500,000 to 150. So we are actually increasing this to, instead of 100 to less than 500, to 100 to about 999 at 1.5 sales load. And the last one also is prospectus of the First Metro Save and Learn Focus Dynamic Fund, wherein the proposed amendment is a sales load of 3% to align it with all the other funds. And the breakdown is also highlighted in front of you. I believe that those are all the changes that are being requested for the revisions of the prospectus, Mr. Chairman. That's all.
Okay. Is there a motion to amend the prospectus?
Mr. Chair, I move that the amendment in prospectus to reflect the SEC approved increase in authorized capital stock for SalDaBaF and FMCF to include the sales load tiers for FMCF and revisions of sales load tiers of SalFocus and Salfin be approved.
I second the motion.
Host will now launch the poll question. You may cast your vote by clicking on the available options. We are voting on the amendments on the prospectus.
Appearing first is the poll for Save and Learn Dollar Bond Fund. And First Metro Consumer Fund. Next is Save and Learn Philippine Index Fund. And Save and Learn Focus Dynamic Fund. The voting will now be closed. Mr. Chairman?
May I now request the corporate secretaries to present the preliminary voting results?
For Salfin, sir, 69.71% voted for the amendments, none voting against, and no abstentions.
For the amendment of the prospectus, the following votes were obtained to approve the amendments. SalDaBaF, 81.28%, FMCF, 67.74%, and SalFocus, 71.95%. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
There being a motion duly made and seconded and the required votes obtained, the amendments in prospectus to reflect the SEC approved increased in authorized capital stock for SalDaBaF and the consumer fund to include the sales load tiers for IMSS money market fund and revision of the sales load tiers for the SalFocus and Salfin is hereby approved. Are there any other matters to be taken up? For Salfin, any matters?
For Salfin, sir, there are no other matters.
Okay. For the other funds?
Mr. Chairman, for the other funds, namely Consumer Fund, SALEF, SalFIF, SalBaF, Money Market Fund, Dollar Bond Fund, and SalFocus, there are no other matters.
Stockholders may raise any relevant questions or express an appropriate comment limited to the agenda by sending an email to esm@fami.com.ph. Any relevant questions or comment received via email shall be properly acknowledged, noted, and addressed accordingly. If there are no other matters for approval of the stockholders, we can now adjourn the meeting. Motion for the adjournment.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the meeting of FAMI Mutual Funds be adjourned.
I second the motion.
There being no other matters to consider, the year 2022 annual stockholders meeting of the FAMI Funds is hereby adjourned. Thank you for your participations. Bye.